Good morning. This is 6 Mile Assembly of God Sunday School class this morning. An unusual time that we're going in, but we're going to keep streaming, keep y'all up to date. Right now we're going to continue our study in Daniel. So we're in lesson 4. It's the prophecy about the 4 empires. Christ's everlasting kingdom will triumph over all. And our key verse will be in Daniel chapter 7, verse 14. I will mainly be reading from the ESV today. So Daniel chapter 7, verse 4 is the key verse. 14. Which reads, "And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed." So, Daniel's one of those interesting books in the Old Testament because he's over there and it's full of prophecy. I mean, everyone remembers Daniel in the lion's den and how Daniel interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and then you have his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. A lot of people remember them by their Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but their Hebrew names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But we're already past some of that, and we're now into this prophecy about the 4 empires. And so in chapter 7, we see that prophetic vision of human history that extends Daniel's time into Christ's millennial reign, which will last for, 1,000 years. As such, the lesson will prompt us to dig deep into end-time prophecy, so it's going to be a little weighty. So as we study, however, the lesson says, we also find valuable encouragement and hope to sustain us today. So Daniel 7 reminds us that no matter the chaos and turmoil of this world, as Christians, we know that Christ does hold our future. Okay, so for a little history background, most of the Old Testament's written in Hebrew, with the exception of Daniel chapter 2, verse 4 through 7 and 28. It's written in Aramaic. The language of the Mesopotamian region during that time. That's where Daniel was during the exile. Therefore, the language of the government and commerce was Aramaic. And scholars note that this use of language helps us link Daniel's vision in chapter 7 to King Nebuchadnezzar. The change in language may have been due to the subject matter of the passage. But anyway, quick background. Nebuchadnezzar, he died in 562 BC, and then after that, the empire just crashed. We kind of went over that last Sunday when it was there at the church. But Nebuchadnezzar passed away in 562 BC. Then the Babylonian kingdom started to do that decline. And Daniel could tell by Jeremiah's prophecies that, hey, the 70-year exile is coming up. The end is near. And so then he remembered from Nebuchadnezzar's dream that it was about to switch from that head of gold. Remember that statue that Brother Willoughby was talking about the other day? Well, he knew the head of gold was about to become the shoulders of silver. And so right now, last Sunday, during the Sunday school lesson, we went over the writing of the wall with Belshazzar. So now we're kind of jumping back into the past with chapter 7, because here we are and Belshazzar is still king. Well, remember, Nabonidus, his father, was actually the king, and Belshazzar was co-regent. That's why when he offered those gifts and that position in the kingdom, he only offered the third highest ruler in the kingdom, because he was second. He couldn't go any higher than that, and he wouldn't. So here we go. That was the end. So now in chapter 7, we actually go back to the beginning of his reign. So let's start reading in chapter 7, verse 1. I'm going to read through the whole chapter because that's what our lesson covers today. So in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the sea, the great sea, and four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground, and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were open. I looked in because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking, and as I looked, the beast was killed and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and he was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever, and ever. Then I desired to know the truth about the 4th beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, that seemed greater than its companions. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, As for the 4th beast, there shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand, for a time, times, and half a time. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. So that is the reading for today. Now we're going to jump in. So it's a very interesting lesson right now, because it just seems like everything just fell in place for all that we're going to or through, And the introduction for our lesson is I'm supposed to ask you guys this question or discuss it. Is it important for Christians to talk about end time prophecies and be aware of what the Bible teaches about future events? If so, why? Well, most of the most of the Bible when it was written was prophecy. So here it is. Everything's, what was it, a third? 2/3? Anyway, it's very important for us to know it. So note that the scripture tells us to be watchful of the times and prepared for Christ's return. Matthew chapter 24, verse 42, and then 1 Peter 1 and 13. The lesson in Daniel, as well as lessons to come, deal with the issues of end time events. So I find that interesting. We're commanded to watch for Christ's return. We're not, and a lot of people, they get really focused on Antichrist and the mark, but we're commanded to watch for Christ's return. I mean, we're given signs, but watch for Christ. I mean, keep your eyes on Jesus. He's the author and the finisher of our faith. Be ready. He's coming soon. So then we get a lion, a bear, and a leopard. Now, what does all this mean? So it's important to note the timeline and where we're at with the book of Daniel. So remember, when we started, chapter 5 last week covered Belshazzar, the end of his reign, the writing on that huge wall. But now we're going back to the very beginning of the reign, which was really Nabonidus' father, and he's co-regent. So Daniel, he was probably, new leadership. They want somebody younger in position. So Daniel, about this time, this first year of Belshazzar, he's probably in his 70s. And so verse 2 begins with the description of the four winds. It says, in the first year of King Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and the visions of his head as he lay in his bed. And he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. So he's seeing something similar to Nebuchadnezzar's dream of his the statue. So only he's seeing not just something he sees it different than Nebuchadnezzar does. He sees beasts. He doesn't see a godlike statue that Nebuchadnezzar may have worshipped. It was different. So the four winds represent spiritual forces at work in heavenly places, affecting godless nations and human events. The four beasts Daniel saw rising from the sea were four earthly kingdoms of world history. When you see the lion with the wings, it's really, most scholars will, it's the king of beasts is the lion, and he's given wings. So it's really defining Babylon as that kingdom. Because I was reading Exploring Daniel, then expository commentary by John Phillips. He's got some really great stuff. So now here you go. Nebuchadnezzar had the swift conquests, and they're depicted under the symbol of a lion with eagle's wings. So the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC humbled Egypt before Nebuchadnezzar, and it opened the way to the west. In a series of swift campaigns, Nebuchadnezzar conquered all of Syria and Israel, and invaded Egypt and besieged and took ancient Tyre. But that career of conquest came to an end. The eagle's wings were plucked, and we see in Conversion, chapter 7, verse 4. That's the lesson book. My Bible's over here. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. What happened to Nebuchadnezzar? Things changed. The conquest was different. He turned to domestic affairs. He sent armies westward to punish restless provinces as he did Judea, 598, and in 586. But war had lost its charms. The lion was made to stand on its hind legs. The savage rage of the wild beast was replaced by the heart of a mortal man. As Daniel well knew and had recorded in chapter 4, all these events had come to pass as far as Nebuchadnezzar personally was concerned. The reigning emperor at the time of this vision, Nabonidus, was more interested in peaceful pursuits than in the art of war. Even Belshazzar would sit in the city of Babylon with the Medes and Persians howling at its gates, secure in the fond illusion that he need not trouble himself. Babylon, after all, was impregnable. But we know from last week's lesson, it was not. The time had come, judgment had come. Babylon was falling. So then the vision changed. What happened? Verse 5, and behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth, or between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. And that's definitely the Medo-Persian Empire. It was powerful. The 3 ribs in the bear's mouth describe accurately the initial conquests of the Medo-Persian alliance. The 3 kingdoms that the Medo-Persian Empire swallowed were Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. The empire was to devour much flesh, a characteristic of the Medo-Persian method of waging war. It never moved unless it had overwhelming force with which to crush all resistance. It was wasteful of human life. It was persistent in seeking its prey. When Darius marched through Scythia, for instance, he mobilized nearly 750,000 men, not counting his fleet of 600 ships. When Xerxes marched against Greece, he took 2.5 million troops with him. The movement of this mass of men looked more like a migration than an army. Even Persia's last and most pacific king brought more than 500,000 men to the battle of Issus, and 2 years after their defeat was able to find another 1,000,000 men for his final battle. So the policy of the Persian emperors was to fill the ranks of their armies with hordes of people from conquered lands, territories stretching all the way from India to the Mediterranean. Herodotus, he was that Greek historian, he counted and described no less than 56 nationalities conscripted by Xerxes for his march against Greece. The feats of organization, the logistics, and the provisioning of such enormous hordes stagger the imagination, and these troops were swelled by camp followers of all kinds. We can see what disregard for human life was involved in these wars. Arise, devour much flesh was not mere rhetoric, but a terrible reality of the Persian Empire. And then the scene changes again. What happens? After this I looked, and behold another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. This is an excellent, what's the word? Of course I can't think of the word when I'm online. It's a depiction, an excellent depiction of Alexander the Great, and how the Grecian Empire came into play. The leopard, with its grace and beauty, speed, and ferocity, was a fitting symbol of Alexander the Great. I should have just read from the book. And the Greek Empire. The 4 wings of the leopard added to the picture, depicting the amazing speed with which the youthful Macedonian subdued the entire world. He virtually leaped across the world. His armies, though small, were strong, brave, well-equipped, and brilliantly led. It took Alexander about 10 years to avenge Greece on the Persians for the onslaughts of this foe in the past. And although they brought him lasting fame, it did not bring him lasting fortune. He died at the height of his success. And so you have the 4 heads, and so his kingdom is actually divided between his 4 generals. And then, of course, one of them ends up with the area of Israel at that time. And then we have a very interesting description. Verse 7, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. That's interesting. He saw a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. See, the first 3 he described, it was like a lion with wings. The other one was like a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. The other was a leopard with 4 heads and wings like a bird. But this one, it's great and terrifying. He doesn't really, that's the only way he could describe it. And it's fitting because for the Roman Empire, see, Daniel, he didn't have any idea about the Roman Empire. It just started out as a small little village, and it eventually just grew and grew and grew. But This was long before Daniel's time, but he saw this empire before in this dream. So the Babylonian Empire lasted barely 70 years. The Persian Empire about 200 years. The Greek Empire about 180, but the Roman Empire lasted some 500 years, longer than all the others put together. Indeed, it was in its disunited state. It continued down the centuries to this hour, and now awaits its resurrection. Remember Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue? You had the gold head, that was Babylon. You had the silver shoulders. You had the trunk of bronze, and you had those long iron legs. So it lasted a lot longer, and it was strong, and it was terrible, as Daniel saw in his dream. The first phase of this terrible empire has now already passed into history, and what a wild beast it was in its day. By 266 BC, Rome had subjected the entire Italian peninsula, but in 264 BC it began its wars with its rival Carthage. Then it brought Spain beneath its sway. It defeated the great Carthaginian general Hannibal in the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. I mean, it just all the way up to the point where you get to that crescendo in Luke chapter 2, and there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. At just the right point in time and in history, God sent his son, and I'm jumping off of the main study, but everything was falling in place, and God revealed it to Daniel. So we had those four beasts, but the chaotic, ominous scene described in Daniel 7, 1-6 might cause some to think of our chaotic world today. I mean, it's different right now. I don't remember anything like this. And some of you, I'm pretty sure y'all haven't seen anything like this either. I need a tea for the throat. Many live in fear as they see constant economic and political changes in the world. Some seek spiritual guidance from a variety of sources, trying to discover what will happen next and to understand the connection between the natural world and the spiritual world. Every now and then I get on Facebook and I see Ray Comfort and his Living Waters Ministries, and how he goes out and he witnesses to these people in California. He goes to the college campuses. He'll go out there by the beach. And it's incredible what some of these people say they believe. It's really weird too. I know some people say, "Oh, you Christians, you believe some weird stuff." No, we don't have to be alarmed about all the stuff going on around us. I mean, this coronavirus thing has really opened up a lot of people to their mortality. They realize it, so it really starts them to think, hey, what's after this life? Some don't believe there's anything, but you start talking to them and you start sharing this gospel, this good news of Jesus, and you'd be surprised how open some people are right now. So I know we're not supposed to be out, and catch anything, but there's always methods of witnessing. And we don't need to be alarmed, because with all the stuff going around, as the book of Daniel teaches us, what? God is in control. God shows Daniel, hey, look, I'm in control. And a lot of the stuff that Daniel sees, remember we just read, he was disturbed by it because he didn't fully understand everything. So as we read Daniel chapter 7, verse 7-8, we find that the fourth beast is not like the first three. It resembled no animal, for it is described as terrifying and frightening and very powerful. That's NIV. It had 10 horns, perhaps corresponding with the 10 toes on the statue. Remember Nebuchadnezzar, he had the feet were like that iron and the clay mixed. And then you have the ooze between the toes. That's where we are now. We're the ooze. So, many scholars agree that it represents the Roman Empire. This kingdom was much fiercer than the others, crushing all who opposed it. So the beast changed. That's the iron in the statue. But now the beast changed before Daniel's eyes, growing another small horn. Many scholars see the little horn in this verse referring to the Antichrist. So the Antichrist will arise in the future during the tribulation period. His peak will be in the Great Tribulation period. And it will be Satan's final attempt to rule humanity before Christ's millennial reign. So governments and rulers follow a multitude of motives, attitudes, and actions. However, Because of the sinful condition within human hearts, even a government with the best intentions cannot bring about true peace and harmony in the world. We'll never get peace until the Prince of Peace comes. Only he can bring it. And his name is... I was waiting for somebody to text it up there. It's Jesus. God gave Daniel this dream to help him, and all God's people recognize that he is in control of every event in history. Earthly kingdoms are temporary and subject to the will and power of God. The people of God must not look to human political powers for answers to their questions and hope for the future. Neither are they to be dismayed by the actions of ungodly rulers. God is sovereign over human rule, and his kingdom alone is permanent. Permanent. Everything is falling in place for the return of Jesus Christ. So, we can express trust in Christ no matter the circumstances. No matter if you're out of toilet paper. You can trust in Christ. Now we're going to be jumping around a little bit because we're going to save that part of the Ancient of Days for last. So we're going to actually jump from verse 9 to verse 15. I'm going to get a little tea. Do I have any questions, comments, complaints? Nothing. Anybody else here? No? Okay. I'm at Grandma and Grandpa's. Everything's set up here. Okay, Daniel did not understand what he had seen. So he went up to someone who was standing nearby and asked them the question. It was an angelic being. Usually it's incredible because you read the book of Daniel, and Daniel, he's run into angels, and he's terrified, and he's fallen, and he's nervous, and he can't handle it. They're incredible beings. But this time, he's not afraid. The vision troubles him so much, he has to know. So he walks up to this angel, and he wants it to be he wants that understanding. So the four beasts represented four kings and kingdoms that would ascend to the power in the future. And as stated earlier, the fourth beast was different from the others, verses 19 through 20, and is thought to represent the Roman Empire. The description of the Roman Empire is fitting since it would at its peak devour the entire world, or the known world of Daniel. The features and actions of the fourth beast are given with greater detail in verses 19, verse 25. The 10 horns are believed to be 10 nations that will have their political roots in the old Roman Empire. So another king rising up after the 10 kings in verse 24 is the little horn who overpowers 3 of the 10 kings. So the remaining 7 will submit to his leadership, and the final king will be Antichrist. The Antichrist is seen as arrogant and defiant. He unleashes a tirade of blasphemies against God, and he launches a fierce war against the holy people. So we see that as the Jewish people during this time, and that last half of the tribulation. Zechariah chapter 13, verse 8, you can reference that. In chapter 14, verse 1, where it goes into the day of the Lord. Revelation chapter 12, verse 1 through 6. And so he's going to be actually permitted to continue for that 3.5 years, that great tribulation period, that war against the Jewish people. Remember, because you get to that point where you find out that there's 144,000 that are saved during that tribulation period, and then he causes that war during that next 3.5 because he sets up that peace treaty, that 7-year peace treaty with Israel, So, but however, at God's appointed time, the Antichrist will be removed, he will be judged, and he will be destroyed. So Daniel's vision tells us that the Antichrist will attack God's people in the future. However, we must recognize that Satan uses many tactics to lead us away from Christ even today. I don't think I have to give illustrations of that. He's very subtle. It doesn't have to be something huge. It can be something very little. It can be, I'm just going to go ahead and give examples since I thought about it. Something little as, are you annoyed by someone? like like you really dislike someone. That can, oh, what's the word? Of course, once again, I'm live. I can't think of the words. It can fester, it can corrupt, it can be... What's the word? Anybody else want to text me something? Contaminate. We'll use that one since it's fitting for what's going on right now. It can contaminate you, and then it eventually kills you. So Satan subtly tries to make us ashamed to identify as Christians. I mean, God's people are often portrayed as foolish and intolerant when they stand for godliness. I mean, just turn on the news. Satan also uses less subtle methods to defeat us, accusing us of past sins. Oh, I believe he did that to Paul. Can you think about that? There he was. He used to, when he was known as Saul, what are you doing preaching the gospel, Paul? You don't have any business doing this. I mean, how many of those Christians did you drag off to jail? How many of them did you vote for them to be executed? You shouldn't be doing this, Paul. Do you think he didn't do that? Oh, I believe he did. So Satan, he uses those, he'll bring that up. Pretty sure Paul reminded him of his future, though. That's what we do too. It's because we are a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. So recognizing that the Christian walk will not be easy helps us prepare for such trials. Yet as Daniel 7 shows us, our hope is greater than any fear. So while Daniel's vision mainly deals with various earthly kingdoms and their temporary dominance, the final outcome is inevitable. Jesus is victorious. And when Jesus is victorious, we get to inherit that. We get to enjoy that victory. So God's people of every generation, have experienced or exercised endurance even in the face of great hardship. Ultimately, all Christians will share God's kingdom with him forever. The saints of the Most High from every generation will one day receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Because every Christian is an heir of God and a joint heir with Christ. Romans 8:17. So we will be a part of this eternal kingdom. I mean, it says we will rule and reign with him, yes? Oh, I think about that judgment seat of Christ. I think about those, the parable of the talents. He says, to one he gave 5. Well, when he invested in his master's kingdom, he received 5 more. The one who invested 2 talents received 2 more when he invested in his master's kingdom. But the one that did nothing with his talent, what did he receive? Nothing. He still had that 1 talent. He didn't invest in the kingdom. But everyone that did invest, the one with 5, the one with 2, they received 100% in return. So because every Christian is an heir of God and a joint heir with Christ, we will be a part of this eternal kingdom. Remember, what did the master say to that one servant? He says, you've been ruler over a few things, I'll make you ruler over many things. The rule and the power of the earth's kingdom will be given to the holy people, the Most High, Daniel 7, verse 27. The kingdoms of this world will become the kingdom of our God. It will be an everlasting kingdom. All dominions or rulers will serve and obey him. In verse 28, we will learn that Daniel's dream troubled him. Makes sense. I mean, he saw these things he didn't understand, and he knew its implications. He knew that many believers were going to suffer physically. Their faith would be tried, and it troubled Daniel that so much that he kept the dream to himself. That's how he ends the chapter. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed. But I kept the matter in my heart. So it wasn't time yet. So when you read the book and you get to chapter 5, there's the end of Belshazzar's reign. You get to chapter 6 and you get into Darius. But he keeps what happens with chapter 7 later on. So our response to the word is Daniel's dream is a reminder to all Christians to share their faith. I mean, we've got an excellent opportunity right now, especially if you're quarantined at home. And I know some of you are probably tired of Facebook, but you've got a lot of people on there right now. You can do a lot of witnessing. How often do you share Christ with those lost in the sinful chaos of our fallen world? How can you bring hope to the hopeless? Well, God can show you how to do that. You can show kindness, as love, compassion, mercy. I mean, if you have 2 things of toilet paper, you can give to someone who doesn't have one. And that's kind of funny, but it's sad right now because I know I was at Walmart the other day. Believe it or not, I went to Walmart yesterday, and I was talking to one of the guys who's in the youth group, and he says, "Yeah, we got a thing of toilet paper in today, and it was gone in 30 minutes." Very weird times, but everything's falling in place. Daniel 7 verse 9 marks the beginning of a poetic portion of the vision. Boy, this is the awesome part of it, because we get to talk about the Ancient of Days and how the Son of Man is given dominion. So here we are, we're getting that poetic portion of the vision in which thrones were, the King James says, cast down. I found, and then you have in here on the ESV, it says thrones were placed. So it ushers in the 5th kingdom, the final manifestation of the power of the world. So the poetic passage opens up with the Ancient of Days. He's taking his seat. You have this royal, divine courtroom setting. And the Ancient of Days is, of course, God the Father, if you haven't figured that out yet. And his white robe and his white hair represent his purity and his wisdom. And then you have that reminiscence of Ezekiel chapter 1 with let's see, where is it? It's verse 9. The thrones are placed. The Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow, and his hair as if head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. So if you want to go back and read Ezekiel 1, you'll get that clear picture. Ezekiel was also an exile from Jerusalem, only he went in the 598 exile. Daniel was like in the 597, 590. No, it was 603 BC, then it was in 598. I thought I was ready for this. I'm going to have to go back and do some homework myself. So Ezekiel was a part of the 2nd group of exiles that were taken away from Jerusalem, and then he was taken over there. And so he has his vision in Ezekiel 1. And the stream of fire issued and came out from before him. Boy, that's just incredible. So when I hear people say, when I get to heaven, I'm going to run down those golden streets and there's God, my papa, I'm going to jump into his lap. No. There's fire and lightning coming out of that throne. When you see God in all of his power and his glory and his majesty, you're going to fall on your face. The Ancient of Days is God the Father. Reminiscent of Ezekiel 1, his throne and its wheels are aflame. A flame also continuously issues from his throne. A multitude attends him. Everything in order, or everything is in order. Then the books are open. Boy, it's also in Hebrews where it says our God is a consuming fire. Abraham recognized God as judge of all the earth and knew that he would do what was right. And you can read that in Genesis chapter 18, verse 25. Where remember when he's over there and God says, should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? And he tells Abraham that he's about to go down there to Sodom and Gomorrah. And then Abraham starts talking to him about, are you going to destroy the city even if with the righteous and the sinners? And he starts going from 100 to 75 to 50 to 25 to 10. He stops at 5. And the angels pull out 4 people. So God possesses all knowledge and power, so he alone is worthy to judge. He knows all things and he does all things well, even when it doesn't make sense to us. Psalm 119 verse 68 says, you are good and you do good. Furthermore, God is the righteous judge because he is sovereign. He is in control of everything, including setting up and removing kings and nations. You see Daniel chapter 5 verse 18 and 21. I'm knocking over stuff. God judges the horn, the Antichrist. It's based on his boastful words that the Antichrist spoke. Verse 25 states that the words used to condemn the Antichrist are the words spoken against the Most High. God judges him guilty, and he is thrown into the burning flame, or that lake of fire. Boy, that's something, because we know he's going to be there at that Jezreel Valley, and he's going to be there with his armies. It's that Battle of Armageddon, which Napoleon said is the greatest natural battlefield on the planet. And there he is. He's setting up. He's got his troops and everything. And then God the Father says, okay, this is it. And so Jesus turns out the lights. Sun's out. Moon's out. Everything's out. And then he just rips open that sky and he appears on that white horse. So now I'm jumping ahead. So now we're going to go back to Daniel 7:12. It's parenthetical statement revealing that the effects of the previous empires would continue for a time, though the natural order will change drastically during Christ's 1,000-year reign. Following his return to earth, the effects of sin will not be totally wiped out until the coming of the new heaven and the new earth. So Daniel's picture of the Ancient of Days emphasizes God's wisdom as well as judgment. The one who will judge us with perfect wisdom also holds our future. So this gives us confidence that in the promise of eternal life, God will judge the sinner. But we have hope as we live in faithful service of Jesus. So now we get to go into verse 13. And he saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. If you don't know who this is, I mean, come on. I've mentioned his name quite a few times already, and it's Jesus coming with the clouds of heaven in the presence of the Ancient of Days. The Son of Man, one like the Son of Man. The Son of Man, that was if you remember reading through the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, Jesus used that phrase to refer to himself 80 times, or nearly 80 times in the Gospel. So the Ancient of Days gives a kingdom to the Son of Man, Daniel chapter 7, verse 14. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, and all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So they will worship him. We will worship him. This is a reference to Christ's millennial reign and his kingdom on the earth following the defeat of the Antichrist at the Battle of Armageddon. So the kingdoms of the four beasts will have come and gone, but Christ's millennial kingdom will be worldwide. While the other kingdoms were man-made, earthly, and influenced by evil forces, Christ's kingdom will be heavenly, divinely inspired, and governed by God himself. So sometimes we as Christians, we struggle with even to survive under human rule. I mean, we're in America, so it's not as bad as like some of these other Christians in other countries, like Russia, for example, or the Middle East, most of the Middle East. Not so much Israel, but everyone serving under Christ's rule will flourish during this time. So Jesus' messianic kingdom began while he was on earth, and now it's a spiritual kingdom, but then it's going to be a period of time when it comes on here that's going to be both spiritual and physical. And it'll be established in that 1,000-year reign following his visible return. So as servants of Christ, we can trust that no matter what happens in this world around us, the kingdom in which we belong will survive. One day we will share in the reward he has provided for us. So according to the 16 fundamental truths in the Assemblies of God, the millennial reign of Christ will be, let me read it to you, it will bring the salvation of national Israel and the establishment of universal peace. It's going to be a time like anything we can understand. I mean, we have false peaces right now in the world. There's, as long as I've lived, there's always been a war. I know I haven't been around too long, but as long as I've lived, there's been someone fighting somewhere and in some way. And when Jesus comes, it's going to be peace. 1,000 years of peace. It blows our mind. And so it's going to be that glorious time with his people, with him on earth. Prophecies such as Daniel 7 help us call us to re-examine our priorities and reestablish focus. So, in this chaotic week, in this chaotic world, God, we got to pray, people, because everything's just, we've got so little time, because we won't really be able to witness, because it's going to get to a point where there's nobody we'll be witnessing to, because Jesus has come and it's over. Time's up. And we'll be standing before the throne and get the judgment seat of Christ. I think about that judgment seat of Christ, where we have to give an account not only for what we did, but why we did it. We're building on this foundation that's Jesus Christ, and we're given all those different types of materials. You read 1 Corinthians chapter 3, starting with verse 10. And we're given the materials we're allowed to build with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble. And then it's all going to be tested by fire. Tested by fire. And then we're going to, and like, I think of Pastor Betzer, and he says, and he acts it all out, and he says, is that it? And possibly we feel like Oscar Schindler, he says, one more. I could have saved one more. We're running out of time. So in this chaotic world, it's a perfect time to witness. And to walk with Christ is to trust our life and our well-being to Him no matter the circumstances around you. So pray that God will help you to live in faith instead of fear. I look at this and I was like, wow, this is everything. God helped our Assemblies of God writers. Everything fell in place. So thank you for joining with me this morning. I know I butchered a lot of it up, but as you go out in this week, may the Lord increase your faith and stay strong, and may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face shine down on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up His countenance on you, and may He give you His shalom, that peace that transcends every aspect of your life. God bless you.